Yo, what up, everybody? It is Chris and Greg and Chris, Craig back at it again with another Roots and Branches. This time coming from StreamYard. This is actually our second time coming from StreamYard, but this time it's a little more polished. Today we're going to be talking about conspiracy theories. We'll be back with more after the intro.
Yeah, look, I get crazy when the mic round. No sense of getting hyped now. But
What is good, everybody? It is Chris and Greg and Chris. Already gave the intro. So, little working tidbit, Chris. We'll do the I got something for that countdown. It was a little sloppy, so if you're watching, apologies.
I forgive you.
It's all good. It's all good. Today, since it is streaming, if you're watching, if you're tuning in from the YouTubes, we have full ability to converse with you. So if you pop on and you have some questions during our conversation, please feel free to ask, chime in, comment. If you are watching this at a later date, sorry, shucks. Oh well.
Well, whoa, cool green screen it's doing it. Look at that technology. Is mine?
Because I got the Green Lantern.
Oh, I turned mine off. So, all right. So the plan here, Greg and I, just so you all know, in our personal lives, we talk a lot offline, and during the pandemic, largely through an app called Marco Polo. And as many of us have observed in this season, there has been a huge influx of crazy conspiracy theories. There's so much anxiety, there's so many things going on. There's so many narratives online being circulated and pushed. And we thought we'd just talk about that. So we're kind of going to give you a window into some of our conversation, which is playing with conspiracy theories, because there's something just fun and enjoyable about some of the stories, but then also wrestle with it. What is it? How do we deal with this as people in this world? How do we reflect the values of our faith in the midst of all these stories? So, Greg, what's a crazy conspiracy theory that you've heard in the last few months?
Okay. So it's a big one. It's the big one right now. Most recent one is just around sex trafficking, specifically child trafficking, specifically from the people in the upper tiers of the world. So governmental figures, Hollywood actors and actresses, and just this whole thick ring of very bad stuff. That's the most recent one.
Yeah, that one's so you're talking about the Wayfair conspiracy theory and all that. So that's the thing. There's so many layers to these.
Oh yeah.
The communities, QAnon and various things, they all overlap at times. Actually, we're sharing an office with the Freedom Story. And so the cause of human trafficking is something that I think a lot of folks in Oak Life are passionate about stopping and working against. And so Freedom Story, they work to prevent trafficking, largely in Thailand. But Rachel, their founder, CEO, has told me a couple times about some calls she's on with government officials. There's a big kind of national group that gets together and talks through the state of this issue and what legislation they can work on, all that stuff. And even within there, they're seeing some of this misinformation pop up. And so they're having to communicate hey, this isn't happening, this thing that people are talking about online. So the Wayfair one was that there was a piece of furniture that was $18,000 or something, and had a feminine name. And so people were that must mean they're trafficking people in them, and rich people are buying these things. And so that was over the course of a weekend, it was one person somewhere in our country who tweeted that, put it together somehow, and then it exploded. And it's crazy how quickly those things can catch on, and how far-fetched they can catch on. Why do you think a story like that catches on? Why do you think it goes viral so quickly?
It is, from my perspective, philosophy perhaps, is that we as humans, we need a villain. We need a villain, whether it's something that is just biological in our DNA, whether it's coming up watching a bunch of stories of hero versus villain. There's something about us that wants to point at a bad guy. We also want to point at a hero. So we look for those in our life. So when there's something that is like a secret, people love secrets. So you take this need to point out a villain and you attach a secret to it. It's like, oh heck yeah, let's get in on this. I think that the Wayfair thing, the fact that you have a basic cabinet that's like $8,000 named Becky, it's like, that's weird, but it's not enough, right? It's not enough like tangible evidence to the point that you're alluding to. But then you have individuals who are like an actor whose name rhymes with Bomb Banks, and they're like, they leave the state, the country, and then they delete 3 years worth of tweets that they had these like subliminal messages that line up with this thing. And then there's other information around other actors, actresses, people in power, pointing towards like laws being reduced around pedophilia, around statutory rape, things that at one point were like, yo, this is negative. Now it's like, oh, it's a condition. And there's just a lot of different areas in which this is happening. It's not just Wayfair. So that's where it's like, there's got to be some traction to this somewhere. I think of like the whole wheat and the weeds. Like, yeah, some of it is completely not usable, right? It's false information. But among that train of logic and thought and story, there's some truth there. Yeah. And that's what's trippy.
To your point, so there are human trafficking rings. There is like darkness, and there's some real nefarious actors working in the world. And so it's like we have that sense that stuff's out there. And then somebody makes a very simple argument. And this is where I think that they all fall apart. It's like somebody's like, look, A, and then it goes to B. So Z must be the next step. And like, that's how conspiracy theories work. They're like, here's one data point that kind of plays on that emotion that we have. And that's the other thing is the conspiracy theories, I think they catch on partly because they're emotional narratives. They're not logical or rational. And so if we can draw on our emotion, which to your point, like the hero villain thing, and something we all react against, like something as heinous as human trafficking, like we are quick to just believe it. Like if it goes, all right, yeah, that, and then that. So then we skip over all the necessary steps without any evidence to conclude something over here. But there is some smoke somewhere. So we know that there's something happening. We just are quick to do this other thing. And I think online, there's kind of this like mirror neuron thing going on where we each see it. So if you post something and then one of my friends posts something, as social creatures, we are more likely to believe it because there's trust coming from the relationships. But overall, it's like, I think they're fun to play with. Like, I like talking about UFOs. I like talking about government conspiracies. I grew up watching the X-Files. So those kinds of stories, like sci-fi, otherworldly things. I think it's also because we like to escape from our reality a little bit. And in the reality of conspiracies, things are more under control. Like we can say, like, here's the good people, here's the bad people. It's simple. And our reality is that there's like, it's so chaotic and uncertain that we don't do good with that. We need some boundaries. We need some like, here's the story. This person did this and that. But things are actually just crazy and out of control. And as much as conspiracy theories can be comforting, they're also really dangerous. So let me ask you, or unless you had a response to that, I was going to ask you a question.
I got a ton, but go ahead, shoot.
What do you think the dangers are of conspiracy theories in the modern world?
Well, I think one danger is that we already lost a viewer, so clearly they're not everyone's cup of tea.
Offended by conspiracies, sorry.
Yeah. So the danger is that I think the danger with conspiracy theories is the same danger with anything, is that it can go too far. And when there's conspiracy theories by nature don't have like a set of boundaries. Whereas, for example, if somebody said, hey, is business a bad thing? No, business is not a bad thing. Our economy is established for better or worse around, aspects of business that have made our life better in many ways. People can go too far with business, and then it can become very capitalistic, and then money becomes before people, and then there's a lot of negative things I can continue to talk about, but I won't. Going back to the conspiracy theories is that if it goes too far, we like to say when we talk about communion, you are what you eat. If all you're getting is this negative narrative, and that's all you're putting into yourself, and that's all you're hearing, and that's all you're thinking about, and that's all you're looking for in the world, then you will find what you look for. You will see negativity in humanity. You will see negativity in front of you when it may not even be there. So the particular danger with conspiracy theories is that, one, there's no like solid foundation because it's all theoretical to a degree. And then the other part is that it could just wear on you. It can wear on you. Just a personal thing. I was going down the rabbit hole of the whole pedophile ring, and there's even worse stuff that I'm going to spare our viewers from. And that week was a heavy week for me. And I'm usually a light, go with the flow, lighthearted guy, but that week was kind of tough. So it's definitely something that can bring you down, if taken too far.
Really. It's what's that verse in Philippians? Like, whatever is beautiful, whatever is noble, whatever is true, like meditate, dwell on those things. I don't think we realize how much, and this is like a kind of a separate conversation, an adjacent conversation, but how much what we consume, what we watch, what we scroll through, like has an effect over time inside of us, like in our spirits. So I do think you are what you eat, and we should watch that. So I want to add to the dangers that I think there is. We're in a vulnerable place, and social media is potent in terms of how much it can get us to act and believe, and it comes across as true. Like there's stories all over the world where a conspiracy theory circulates on Facebook, and people then move to action based on something that's completely a lie. So like close to my heart is the country of Myanmar. We have a lot of friends there, and early on Facebook, like a culture, a nation largely skipped like the internet and desktops and went straight to like cell phones and Facebook. So a lot of us like have this intuitive sense of what's not true and what's reliable. Like we kind of can vet like a bot from a person intuitively because we've like grown up with this stuff. But imagine like all of a sudden you've been given a cell phone, and the Facebook, which in Myanmar is synonymous for the word internet. Like when people talk about going on the internet, they say like, I'm going to go on Facebook. All of a sudden there's this story that all your friends are circulating that the next town over, these people did this really awful thing and murdered somebody or whatever. That groupthink can move people to action based on fake information. And so like people have died, like there's been flare-ups of conflict, and even, one of the big ones at QAnon is famous for is Pizzagate, right? Which like, again, yes, there are bad people who do terrible things to people. But without any data, somebody went and tried to like shoot up this place based on an online story, and over time getting worked up and believing it. And so I think we have to like not only be careful of what we're taking in and if it's dark or it's bringing us to goodness or beauty, but also we need to learn how to like think rationally again. We should think emotionally too. But like with all this misinformation that's out there, we need to have like some sort of framework for how to filter what's reliable and what effects we can actually have on something. And so I think like science is actually important. So like when people send me articles, I always look at like, what is this website and what is their about say? Where are they located? Is there anybody like trustworthy, like, or at least that has like their motives are to present data and information, not to like propel some foreign crazy story.
Right.
Because there's so much that out there. Like I'm gonna, one last thing I'll ping pong back to you, but like a lot of so this is a common one. Anybody can look this up most days. in the morning, if you were to jump on Twitter and see what hashtags are being are circulating, are trending, there's websites you can go to track where those hashtags originated and who's circulating that information. And a lot of the political stuff, so like after the debates, Democratic debates, you'd go on to Twitter and see like an anti-Pete Buttigieg hashtag or a pro-Trump one, like the next morning, like cancel Trump or whatever it is. And like, why is it circulating overnight? Like, well, because there are bot farms or they're actual actors in Russia or foreign countries that are circulating false information and trying to get us swept up in these stories, these things that aren't true. So, for instance, commonly one is they come from Belarus, like, which is a former Soviet bloc country that has a lot of Russian entanglement. So the fact that there's all these people just playing with us, like, that's maybe another danger to conspiracy theories, is like, we're just getting manipulated by somebody, some people, some forces.
Big facts.
So stepping out of that, having like a framework of knowing what's trustworthy and what's not, or at least more trustworthy. And that's controversial because, to what's trustworthy to me may not be to you, which there's a lot of those discussions. Okay. Yeah. Any comments there? I have a question.
Yeah. That's where I was going to go next, was the idea of trustworthy. I was having this conversation with a friend of mine. It was an individual who hit me up and had a white presenting individual who had feelings about stuff, racially charged stuff. And I have history with this person, so I don't mind stepping into conversation with this person. And they continue to give me data on things that it was misrepresented data. And the best way I could give insight was that data in and of itself are just like attributes to a movie. If I was to tell you, like, what's your favorite movie, Chris?
I'll just, the first one that comes to mind to keep the conversation flowing, Forrest Gump.
Forrest Gump. Okay. No shade on Tom Hanks. Love Tom Hanks, but
is that the person?
I mean, anyway, so so if you were to tell me who the actor is, what the overall plot line was, and some of your key favorite scenes, there's no way that's going to capture the story that the movie tells by watching it, right? Data points do not tell a story. The person using the data points chooses which aspects they want to use to push whatever narrative they're trying to push. There's always a narrative. It's not just a buzzword. It's a reality when we get information. So if we're going to just say, okay, well, what's the data? Well, to your point, well, who's the data coming from? And then when you think about where the data is coming from, it's like, how many stories of people lying from places of power do we have to see? How many movies, books, stories, life examples of people being manipulated by higher power systems do we have to come across to realize that data in and of itself probably isn't the first thing that we should look at when doing our own research? It's like tying this back to, and I know you have a question, so please hold on to it. Tying this back to this idea of conspiracy theories from a faith perspective. It's what do we learn from good old Martin Luther, is that just listening to someone tell us the truth is not enough. We have to go out and find the truth. We have to do the work, find the narratives, find the themes in those narratives to start to get an example. Like you said, you intuitively kind of pick up on what's true and what's not true when you're, enamored and like engaged in this thing on an ongoing basis. So I think that there's a hesitancy in the opposite of the group think as one negative aspect of conspiracy theories. On the flip side, the antithesis of that is group follow, right? And it's like, hey, we've been given this narrative that trust A, B, and C, trust A, B, and C. And when you grow up and A, B, and C is what you've been told to trust, you're never going to think that you can't trust them because we're conditioned to trust them, right?
Yep.
So it's like, you got to be able, we have to do a better job of learning and teaching how to filter what is true for ourselves.
And to your point, there has been a lot of power brokers or people, organizations, whatever, using that and to influence people in a negative way and spreading a story that's not true. I think the danger there is to say, look at that. So I'm going to go all the way to the other extreme and say the earth is flat. Like, and that's as people, we can't hold a little bit of tension and nuance, and have like the process of trying to find a more likely story requires work and effort. It's not as pleasurable as finding some dude on YouTube, 2 dudes on YouTube maybe, who are just venting, but it's easier to just go like, look, the government messed up, so Illuminati and Bilderberg Group, like, and we do that because there's a little bit of truth to those things. So for me, I think it's important to like look at the sources. I'm skeptical, but have slightly more trust of academic institutions. I also would acknowledge their bias, but I'd say it's more likely that like these 3 universities are closer to something that's true than it is Alex Jones or whoever. Again, there's so many places to go, like, or TikTok, like some dude on TikTok. Yeah, they got a TikTok. Great. What do they know? Like, at least within those systems, there is like some sort of structured accountability, like, you know, and there's a plurality of voices of people who have thought critically in the world, and have done research and trust science. So yeah, they may be wrong, but they're less likely to be wrong than what we see online. And I would say most people's perspective online is just a perspective. Yeah. And so you take all of it together, you add up the data points, you see the backstory, and you think objectively about human nature. And I think a big thing for people is faith, bringing it back to that, is this drawing me towards love of God, love of neighbor, or is it spinning me out into a cycle of like heroes and villains? Because one of the dangers with conspiracy theories is, I just read this article this morning about how QAnon is basically a form of Nazism rebranded. Like the Nazis had the same story. There's this child trafficking ring, a cabal of high up people in the deep state, and they're sending these secret messages, and the enemy is the Jewish community. Like, and so it got a whole country, like there were these pamphlets that were passed around about this story, and it was a baseless conspiracy theory about the Jewish population taking power. Like, it's like that there was no data there, but it played on that. We're anxious, we're concerned, there's struggle in our world, we need an enemy. So anytime it's pointing a finger at a group of people, without the data and with the sense of mob justice, like, that's not okay. Like, I trust our democratic institutions. I don't trust them completely, but I trust them more than Twitter cancel culture that's going to go after somebody. Right. Like, there's a reason we have your right to court and to be tried by a jury of peers. Like, that's flawed, yes, but it's better than, like, that's what my fear is. We're like devolving. Like, we're burning the house down with fair critiques of our systems, but without any sort of newer, better idea. Like, we're just the devolution, if that's the word, is we're just going to like mob think on Twitter. And so whoever got the best conspiracy theory can draw power. And that's why I think Trump doesn't say he doesn't believe in Q, because he knows it gives him power. Like, he's been asked about this a bunch of times, and he like doesn't outright deny it. Like, there was I think it's in Texas, there was a representative about to be elected or just got elected that had supported or like propagated QAnon websites and conspiracy theories. And somebody asked, like, what do you think about this? And he just said, oh, they're great. They're a supporter of mine. Like, he dodged it altogether, because he knows we can be manipulated by this stuff. So I kind of ranted about there.
It's weird because it's like, on one hand, there's this de-evolution, but then the systems in power have allowed the person to be in office that is currently our president. So it's like, I think that both sides of the spectrum are flawed. There's this balance somewhere in the middle.
More flawed.
Which is more flawed? Well, it depends on what perspective you're looking at and what world you live in. I don't mean that as like anything but a reality. Like there are worlds within worlds. There are different cultures and different perspectives, and it's like, to the person who is closest to living an injustice, the person on TikTok could be the most truest, redeeming story that they've ever heard. And to the person who has grew up in a situation where, you know, laws and statutes that are currently in place align with their life and their experience, then, you know, so it's like there is no, and I think that's the problem, is that when we look and say, okay, this group is the better group, or that, like, what's the lesser of two evils? That conversation, look how far that's gotten us, right? I don't think it's about finding who or what groups are better or worse, because at the end of the day, we are not up against people. It's powers and principalities. What systems, if anything, what systems and what groups are upholding those powers and principalities that are in place? And so it's like, it's less about the groups and more about what is in power. And I think that's what's the most attractive thing about this conspiracy thing, is because it's pointing towards this idea of power and the abuse of it more specifically, which is something that is, as people of faith, we believe that to be a constant, right? And I know that there's some tricky stuff when you're like, well, just saying you believe in faith doesn't mean it's like a sound thing. But yeah, that idea of power is just,
yeah. So we all know that power is flawed, and it plays on that story. Like, yeah, and good pushback on the binary. I tried to get you to answer to, like, who's the good guys? Because that's one of the lessons here. But I would frame it as there may not be a side, but they're not parallels. Like, this is where like the flat Earth conversation, like, all of a sudden this narrative is out there that is not true, not scientific, based on misinformation, great YouTube videos and, you know, emotional music. But all of a sudden it's the conversation becomes, do we believe in the Earth being round or the Earth being flat? As if they're equal arguments, and they're not. Like, they're so that's where, like,
yeah,
I was trying to go with, like, well, I trust this more. Sure, we're always learning more about science and the world and the universe and all that stuff. Like, I trust that more, and my objective experience backs that up. And I don't know what to do. How to, like, I don't want to give to an outlandish idea or story that has some danger to it, or just not based in science or logic. Like, just because it is a valid perspective in terms of a human is thinking it, and should treat everybody with love and dignity and respect and listen and all that stuff, they're not equals. Does that make sense? So maybe it's not who's good and who's right, but who carries more, whose perspective should we take more seriously?
Yeah.
And by who, I mean, like, groups, like, and systems. And so I like, as an example, I would trust a consensus of scientists over an individual online.
Right.
That's not saying one person is good and one person is bad, though.
Right. No, I dig it. I like you bringing up the I'm sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
Yep. I talked enough.
I like you bringing up the flat Earth conversation, because going back to something you said earlier, what leads us to our relationship with others, right? If the Earth is flat, that doesn't change my relationship with you one bit, right? This idea of this circle of going around with the Pizzagate, the whole pedophile circle and stuff. And there's a bunch of things that have popped up on Netflix with a gentleman, I can't remember what his name is, and then another new show and stuff like that. That conversation does impact our relational dynamics as people, whereas I don't think the flat Earth one does. So I think some conversations are worth going down the rabbit hole and spending some energy and effort on, while other conversations, to me, is more distractive. It's just divisive. It's just trying to pit people against each other. I don't care if I don't believe the Earth is flat, but I don't care if someone says, "Hey, the Earth is flat, man." I'll be like, "All right, well,
yeah,
a picture of it."
it's a good point. There's a sense of, like, what's more urgent or what's more dangerous. Like, and, you know, danger is somewhat subjective and all that, but I would say it does matter. Like, ideas collectively form groups, and groups form systems. And like ideas, this is why theology is an important conversation, because what we think about God affects how we view the world and treat our neighbor. And so if we believe in a first century gender norm, that's going to affect how people live now. And so we should think through those things. And so, like, for instance, if everybody in America starts believing the earth is flat, like, we're going to stop doing science and stop finding medicine that helps people. And like, I mean, that's a quick jump, right? But like, the point being, those things do have effects, urgency level, and like dangerous impact. Those can be parsed out a little bit. Like, maybe it's not as dangerous as something that would hurt me. Like, if you believed I shouldn't exist because I'm a reptilian from whatever, which is an actual conspiracy theory.
It is an actual conspiracy theory.
For lizard people.
Yeah.
I'd be in good company with our former president, apparently. But
you did something interesting, and it was just to prove a point. You went from A to B to Z real quick. It's hard not to do that, man. It's hard not to do that when there's a deeper, like, underlying concern, because you're absolutely right. I'm all for systems, because you're absolutely right. They determine what we believe. Our beliefs determine how we view people. How we view people determines our actions when we engage. And if it's all about relationships, then we got to make sure we understand what impacts and affects our relationships. Hands down, completely get it. But I don't think people are just going to, like, I have a hard time believing that the earth is flat people are going to, like, dominate the world. And if they are, then, man, I'm just going to move to an island somewhere. You can come with me, man.
It's a good point. That brings up the conversation around how to deal with misinformation. And in terms of, like, let's have the conversation. And it used to be, or not used to be, I don't even know if that's the idea. The hope would be, let's, like, let ideas be talked about in the public square, and the best idea will win out. Like, and that's kind of the pillars of free speech. Like, you can think something crazy and you're allowed to, but it's not going to have any traction because people will see through it. I think we're in a stage right now that's not as true anymore. Like, because internet can be so intoxicatingly convincing. Like, like, your whole world can back up this one story. And so I don't know what we do. Like, there's conversations around censorship, and I think in private platforms, like Facebook is a private business. They can allow whoever they want to be on and not be on. And that's not really free speech. It's, you signed up to be on this thing. So that's the whole conversation. I don't have an answer to that one. Like, I think about that one a lot, but I actually want to shift it because I want to talk about how people of faith, there are these studies that, like, Christians are, and we're going a little long, so we won't go too much longer, but
saw that.
We could go deep, but statistically speaking, anybody's as likely to believe in conspiracy theories as other people, but Christians, specifically conservative Christians, are more likely to affect how they live and get deeper into it. Like, so their depth of belief and action around conspiracy theories, and that's interesting. That's problematic to me, and it's described as because, especially for more fundamentalist Christians or conservative Christians, there is a suspension of belief. Like you are just told what to believe, in a sense. Like, the Bible said it, God wrote it, must be true, or whatever the saying is. And I think people of faith should be wrestling always and opening up their ideas and searching through them. So I hope, as people of faith, as Christians, Jesus followers, like, we would always walk the path of love. We'd follow, but we'd have an open mind, and we'd think critically, emotionally, and critically. Like, those are both data points, and we'd see people with compassion online, even if they have crazy ideas.
That's good, man. And then as people of faith, specifically Christians, it's like, well, where does the Spirit play into this? Where does this idea of being tapped in to the source of life that allows for discernment to be a thing? If ideas of faith are, and spirit is like too much, well, let's just look at an athlete, right? An athlete gets to a certain point in their craft where it's not about the data points of how to do a particular move or how to play a particular game. You have to think on your feet, and things are going to be happening to where rational thinking is now out the window. Now you're just responding. And when you go through certain practices enough, you get to a point where you can respond adequately given the situation. And I think as people of faith, in a similar sense, the more we practice these disciplines of tapping into the Spirit, the better we'll be able to see through the BS. Is that a hope? Definitely. Is that a guarantee? Depends on the person, right? Depends on the individual's walk and whatnot. But like, I don't want to discredit our ability to discern. That's what we're called to do. And I think that right now, more than ever, our need to be able to discern, BS from reality is paramount right now.
Yep. Yeah, and that gets into the conversation around how much do we trust medical professionals, like when there are medications or vaccines, like will we trust it or will we not, like all that stuff. And I think the discernment, it's a good point to end on, because discernment is super important. And I think it's something that there's lots of ways to talk about it, but like if it's drawing you towards connection, health, love, beauty, goodness, that's in the right-ish direction. Like, is it doing harm? Is it like, I think a lot of the conversations where like people are so upset about having to wear a mask, like as if it's their right, like to have not to wear a mask. Like, I think that inherently is, this is going to sound judgmental, but inherently a slightly more selfish perspective. Like, is this valuing the health of my neighbor? Am I loving myself and others like with grace and compassion, or am I getting angrier and riled up? And is this making me sleep less because I'm stressed about stuff? Like, those kinds of questions are discernment questions. Like, and then in like biblical, accounts, we're supposed to find wise counsel and like, what is my community and trustworthy people? Like, who do we think is wise? Well, it's usually people who have thought about it long or have more experience. Like, what do the sane, wise people say about these issues that I trust? And so having those people in your corner, like, because we all got that crazy uncle who like loves to talk conspiracy theories and has super fun ideas. But is that person loved and cherished by God and created in the image of God? Yes.
Yeah.
Are they wise counsel?
Yeah.
Good question. Can they create a great YouTube video making themselves seem like wise counsel? Yes, they can. Absolutely, they can. But that doesn't mean they're the elders or whatever the language we want to use. So I don't know, I trust scientists more than I trust doctors, people who think critically and have their life shows that they are balanced and they're thinking through things and are walking with compassion and all that. So discernment. So we should discern. Any last comments there?
That's good, Chris. That's good. That's good. I just, as you're talking, I'm thinking of the crazy uncle, and not to be that guy, but crazy uncle, John the Baptist. The religious leaders that they knew what they were talking about. They had the time invested. It's like, I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't think there's it's a yes and to everything. It's a yes and to everything. And I think there's a reason why scripture tells us to, taste and see for yourself, because at the end of the day.
Yeah. The line between a prophet and a crazy uncle, like what's that line? How do you tell?
Yeah. And I think you won't know unless you spend time with that person. And that person can give you crazy and give you like timely truth in the same conversation. Sure. So it's like,
but like we said earlier, there are also lines. Like if the crazy is harm to self and others.
Yes. True. Like, big facts.
I'm not gonna, like, that's not worth
big facts.
I've discerned already.
Well, let's end it on this note. Oak Life, let us know what your thoughts are in the comments in regards to what other things we should talk about. What other conversations? What were your thoughts on this particular conversation? And at the end of the day, this is just talk between two individuals who are trying to learn and understand better. So with that, any last words, Chris?
We should have opened up comments more. We should have asked people, like, if you're watching, share.
Well, we did in the intro, and there's two of them. So to the 2/3 of you on love you, to anybody else who's watching this after, continue to live, love, fight, and follow as Jesus did, and step into those conversations. We love y'all. Peace.
I ain't got a hope.